Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer. So excited to be here after a win. I totally forgot what it's like to have a show start off with a Nashville SC win. Definitely brings the energy and vibes up with my two co-hosts, Valere and Clay. I'm so excited to be here talking Nashville soccer, of course. You both were in Atlanta for this weekend. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Valere, can you confirm or deny that you were in
I
Atlanta?
mean, he confirmed for me. He said you
Yeah.
were both there. Clay said
Oh, that's
yes.
true.
Blair
I
and I
guess I guess
waved at
that
each other. We waved at each other inside the stadium.
We
He was in
did.
the press
Clay was
box,
sitting
and
pretty much right under me alongside all the Nashville SC traveling fans. Well, not all, but some of the traveling fans.
completely by accident, I did not know that I was buying directly next to the NSC supporter section. I just went for like the cheapest. I was there with my wife's family, and so I was just like, what's the cheapest clump of tickets that I can get that is like, in a corner or something like that. And sure enough, we got there and I was like, oh, the NSC supporter section is literally to my right.
Very nice.
So
Blair,
yeah, so it was her family's first time going to a game, which was cool. And then I think that they got an outsized um understanding of me in the supporters group because every single person that walked by, for the most part, I knew in some way. And so I turned to her and I was like, the people that are traveling to watch this game, especially this team, because how bad they are people that have been around for a hot second. So chances are they were there whenever I was way more involved than I am these days.
Valere, I actually do have a question for you. I don't know if you're allowed to do this or not, because I would be curious with Atlanta. Are you allowed to like make a power rankings of away trip press boxes and press offerings? Could you do a power
Yes,
rankings of which ones are top notch? I mean, Dominican
I
Republic,
would love
obviously
to.
number one, right?
What is number one?
Dominican Republic, obviously number one.
That was the best one I've ever been to. Considering there was some concrete areas that I sat in, and they finally got us the Wi-Fi, so that was good. Um, no, I think I just haven't been to many. That's the problem. I've
Ah,
been to Atlanta, I've been to Cincy, obviously George Park. Um, yeah, I don't know if I've been to any other ones, honestly. Obviously the DR, but that wasn't that wasn't actually a press box. That's just
I will say this, although my experience in the Geodis press box has only been at U.S. national team games, and we'll just leave that comment there. I will say that Geodis is one of the better MLS press boxes that you'll get. Like that is an MLS specific one because many of them are quite small and quite terribly placed. And so I'll I'll never forget working at a Houston Dynamo game. Well, it wasn't a Dynamo game, it was a US game at the Houston Dynamo Stadium. And you couldn't actually see all of the field because the corner was completely obscured and you couldn't tell who was taking the corner because the press box was so low and so in the corner that you had to leave the press box to go around to see what was going on so that you could, get the stat or get the tweet for US soccer. So it's pretty wild what you get. It's very much a mixed bag in MLS, but Atlanta, at least it's an NFL press box, so it's pretty nice.
the new stadiums in general, they're pretty good. Right? The older ones tend to be a little harder to figure out.
well, anyways, you both were in Atlanta. Was it a good weekend in Atlanta overall? I mean, with a national win, it's always got to be beneficial, but how was it overall?
It's
Yeah,
good. Yeah, no, I mean it's just Atlanta's just one of those cities where there's just a lot going on. There's something to do. It's not like certain away games you go to, and I think you kind of you have to have a plan or you have to know a little bit more or talk to people or whatnot. But Atlanta, I feel like it's one of those where you can look up what's happening tonight and find something to do, really. Um, that said, I had a good time. My girlfriend was there as well, so we had a good time and went out Friday night and came back Sunday afternoon or evening. Did some I guess shopping too, but mostly just eating, drinking, having a good time, and obviously the game, which was the reason we were there. Um, so yeah, that was fun. I like Atlanta, man. I have fun every time I'm there.
Yeah, I love Atlanta. I used to live down there too, so that's part of it. Unfortunately, didn't get there as early as Valaire did, so I missed out on some of the shenanigans there. Also missed out on going to see the Dodgers play because the schedule was unkind, so I was a little upset about that. But we had mostly family time. I will say this, and this is one of the things that I really like about Atlanta. Atlanta is one of the only MLS stadiums and game days that you go to where it feels like a big deal. Now, part of that is they play in an NFL stadium that's very nice and one of the best stadiums in the country overall. And you know that you weren't going to have they said it was a sellout, but you knew that it wasn't going to be a packed house because both teams were playing poorly. But like when you get downtown Atlanta on a match day, it feels like a huge deal. Everyone knows what's going on. You got so many people that are there, even when it's not very full, it still would sell out basically every other MLS stadium. And it is it is just a different feeling on a match day in Atlanta than a match day in almost every other MLS city. I haven't been to Portland, but I imagine it's similar to Portland in terms of like knowing what's going on when you're in the city. But that is the thing that's special to me because you're walking up and it just feels like a much bigger deal going to an Atlanta match than walking up and going to virtually any other MLS stadium as someone who's been to most of them.
And yeah, I mean, like Portland to me is the best atmosphere in terms of that, and I think the best in stadium atmosphere I've seen in North America, or I've seen in America, I should say. Uh, but just to touch on your point, you're 100% right. I mean, like the feeling, the vibe that they put around it, the sort of marketing, the promos, the way they treat Atlanta United in Atlanta is very first class sports. You know what I mean? It's you don't feel like this is anything lower than the Falcons or the what are they? The Braves. I don't know baseball. But I think it was also part of it is that because I've been to that stadium 3 times now, it was a little sad, honestly, seeing what has happened by playing poorly or getting rid of your manager and your GM and all the issues that Atlanta's going through. This is not an Atlanta podcast, so we're not going to go through that. But I thought it was a little sad seeing like more empty seats, a little bit less excitement. And obviously, I mean, Nashville SC seems to be not having a whole lot of issues playing in Atlanta, except that one game. But like, that used to be one of those stadiums that was like kind of the benchmark for MLS, right? And now, and I agree with you, Clay. It still feels like a big deal. There's still people going, a good amount of people going, but it's just not the same as it was when I visited there 3 years ago. It wasn't even as good as it was last year when I went.
Yeah, I mean it's even night and day. I was there the season they won, the MLS Cup, and I remember watching them play at Bobby Dodd, obviously. So it is a MLS will be better if Atlanta is good, and I think that that's just a empirically true statement. Like if they're getting people in there, it's good. But I'm happy they're not good, and I'm happy that Nashville went down there and won, and I'm happy that Hani once again was the General Sherman to Atlanta that he has been for the most of his career.
Well, and I am curious actually too if Atlanta's where Atlanta is currently at in the rankings and just their play itself also in like kind of inflicted on Nashville people showing up because obviously there were some Nashville fans there, but definitely not as many that have been there in the past. How was it from just being a Nashville fan perspective, being in the stadium, just seeing what was going on? What was that like from that side?
I mean, it was just different than normal. Like usually there's a little bit more animosity, not in a bad way, but in like a competitive way. But it just felt like, I don't know, it felt almost like awake, like generally speaking, compared to like the normal match day atmosphere between Atlanta and Nashville. It was like, well, we're here, we're both here, we're both going through it. But as a Nashville fan, like there's nothing better, obviously, than going into an opposing stadium with a lot of fans there. And it wasn't like some massive Nashville group, but there was they had a section, and getting a win in those sorts of situations is always fun, and it's always one of the better like fan experiences. I traveled separate from the group, but obviously I was right next to them. Um, there's nothing better than getting an away win with a group that that you can hear them. And I will say this, and I know we're going to talk about the game specifically, but one of the things that I really really appreciated was, we've talked about it here. Sometimes, the team isn't always the best about like getting over to the away supporter section after a game. And I was watching because like this is, and so I had joked, was like, we haven't won in 3 months. Come on, guys, you got to get over here. And sure enough, I don't know who it was that grabbed him, but a few guys started walking towards the locker room, and then suddenly all of them were walking to the corner where the fans were. And when you get a win like that, when you end a streak of a poor form, is just a streak of poor form in an emphatic way, like I can only imagine what the vibe on the bus was going back to finally get to the end of such a terrible run of results for NSC.
They were on a plane, and according to BJ Callaghan, it was very quiet. He told me that this morning.
I'm talking about the fans.
Oh, my bad. I thought you were talking about the players.
No,
But
no, no. I'm talking about
I
the
was
fans.
surprised it was quiet, but also like they've lost 10 in a row, so I get it. But for the fans, I'm sure they were having a good time. I did meet up with the fans before the stadium, actually, and then a little bit during the game, I kind of had a couple of interactions, sent a couple of texts. But Clay, you're right. I mean, like there was this whole, I don't know, like it was kind of like we're here. But honestly, Steven, to your point, like I was impressed by the amount of Nashville fans that made it, considering the team was in last place in the East coming into that game. Whether it was in the supporter section or the away supporter section or just around the stadium, I saw a good amount of yellow. I saw a lot of folks sort of cheering Nashville, which it caught me off guard a little bit, but I think it does put in perspective that this team does have fans who are loyal, who do travel, who regardless of what's going on the pitch, they are still fans of Nashville SC, which is pretty cool to see, I would say.
I'll always think of it as no matter what, where the teams are at, wherever Atlanta's at, wherever Nashville's at, obviously this year is, poor for both, but it's still Nashville, Atlanta. It's still one of those things where it is one of the easier road trips for anybody to make. It was a really good weekend to make that trip to Atlanta specifically. I mean, no matter what, it's going to be a fun experience, a fun vibe, no matter how the teams are doing, just because the Atlanta Nashville, it will always be there in some way, shape, or form. Everybody marks this match on their calendar as one to try to make an away trip for. I wish I could have, but I could not have. I was not able to make it. But this is one that will always be marked on the calendar.
Yeah, and I mean, like it's always a big deal to the fans, but it didn't feel like a big deal. Just going back to Clay's point, didn't feel like a big deal leading up to it. And I think a lot of that just has to do with where the teams are, of course, and how bad they're playing. But also, when you look at MLS, there were two much bigger derbies going on, whether it was El Trafico or Hell is Real, and all four of those teams are really good, and all four of these teams playing each other really overshadows anything that the bottom teams would ever do.
Just a little piece of trivia here before we kind of move on to actually talking about the game here shortly. Do you know when the last time was that Nashville won a game by multiple goals on the road?
Mocha.
Was it this season?
It was this season. It was this season.
Hello.
It was also a rivalry match.
Cincinnati?
Yeah.
Did that end 2-0?
2-0 on May 29th.
Oh, I really thought it was 2-1. I thought about it. I really thought it was 2-1 for some reason.
I am just really happy that I won a thing of trivia because I never win national trivia games on this show. So
I watched most of that match at either JFK or on the train in New York. That's why I don't remember it very well.
That might have been. I'm double checking this. Okay. So it wasn't the last clean sheet. The last time Nashville had a clean sheet was June 15th against the Red Bulls. And what a blazer of a game that was. A scoreless draw.
We all knew that one.
Unfortunately, I remember that.
It's unfortunate that you do remember that. But for Nashville, it was all good vibes on the pitch for Nashville SC. And we're definitely going to talk about that right here next on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at Pharma Soccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you did not know already, we do have a Patreon. Go check that out, Pharmaceutical Soccer. It does help the show tremendously. We love doing this every week. We can't talk about how much we love doing it. Well, we do talk about. We love the show. We love doing the show. That's all that matters. So if you go to our Patreon, please check that out. It's only $5 a month to contribute. We would love to have you be a part of our pharmacy and as one of our patients. Y'all are great people that we have.
Yeah, just on that note, shout out to Aaron, who was in the traveling supporters group for Nashville, who walked up to me after the game, said he loves listening to the show. We always love hearing from you guys, so make sure you let us know if you're listening. So shout out to Aaron.
Heck yes, and I'm sure we will definitely get some more listeners because it always is a lot more fun after a Nashville win. Of course, Nashville getting the win in Atlanta, 2-0 win for Nashville. Goals by Alex Mawio and Hani Mukhtar. I It's so weird. We haven't covered a win in so long. I don't necessarily know where to start, like specifically. So Clay, do you have an idea on where you want to start when it comes to talking about this match?
I mean, it's the guy you start with when you talk about Nashville SC, especially if you talk about Nashville SC winning a game, and that's Hani Mukhtar. We've been saying that we've seen these little pockets of play from Hani over the last 2 months where he's starting to it felt like he was turning the corner, where he was starting to be kind of more involved and showing up in good places, getting the ball in places where he can be more successful than he had been during the earlier parts of this winless streak. And I mean, Hani, it's the best game it's one of the best games he's played this season, if not the best game he's played this season. He was everywhere. He's doing a lot of defensive work, which isn't always a great sign. But he put in a huge amount of work, and it does help that it's Atlanta. I've made the William Sherman Hani joke for 3 years on this podcast, and this was another example of that. And um if this is the type of game that they can get out of Hani, they're going to win more games. It just
Well,
is what it is. Like they are, as Hani goes, uh, for all the good that is, but also for all the bad that is over the last 3 months. But I mean, just an unbelievable performance from him, and honestly, one of the better team goals that we've seen in a few years with Hani, like that give and go that he had with Teal Bunbury. Just a great goal, and he deserved the goal. Like he'd done well for most of the game, so getting a goal out of it was a really nice thing. And
yeah.
I think that's where you have to start. You always have to start with Hani, generally speaking, if Nashville has a good game.
Well, and I think it's great for, Honey, like you said, even though it is Atlanta, this team knew that they needed to win this match, and they absolutely did put on, and Honey put on a captain-like performance in this match, knowing that they needed 3 points on the road in a tough environment normally. And he absolutely performed. That rush, that counter goal that he had was just classic Nashville. It was just weird to say classic Nashville when it comes to a BJ Callaghan team. But I don't know. It was really great just to see all these performances on the pitch and all these players playing like it was a must win. And Hani was definitely the driving force in that. Blair, do you want to unmute yourself to actually talk?
Right, right. That is how you speak on these things. No, and I think the defensive stuff it is incredible, honestly, and we can go on and on about it. But it wasn't just Hani; was the rest of the forward line, and maybe I'll touch on it here in a little bit. But since we are on Hani, I like the eye test told you everything you need to know about how good of a game he was having. But when you go back and look at the stats, they correspond very clearly to what you saw. And I think that's always one of those harder things to kind of see in soccer. Is that every now and again we'll go back to the stats and maybe they don't agree exactly with what we saw, or maybe they will kind of touch on it. But this time, looking at Hani's stats, he had the most touches out of anybody in Nashville SC. He attempted the most passes. He completed the most passes out of anybody in Nashville SC. He created 5 shot creating opportunities, and that's the most out of anybody by a mile. And for Nashville SC. And I mean, that's just like me just kind of going through the stats. I'm sure there are a lot more, Oh, he had the most progressive carries. He had the most carries of the team. This is one of those classic performances from Hani Mukhtar as a number 10, which I do think is important to mention. And Teal Bunbury talked about that post match as well. He was playing effectively as a number 10. He was not a second forward. He was not a forward. He was not on the wing. And every now and again, he'll drift right or left, but he was in the middle. He didn't drop too far back down. He wasn't a deep midfielder. He wasn't an 8. He was playing as that classic number 10. And he really thrived on that. I thought he looked incredibly well. He combined really well. But yeah, just going back to that defensive point, what he did defensively, stopping the ball multiple times in his own box, let alone obviously higher up the pitch. But same thing with Teal Bunbury, same thing with Alex Muriel, and same thing with Sam Surridge. And when you see those 4 guys fighting for the team, when you see those 4 guys dropping all the way back to make sure Atlanta doesn't get an easy goal, I think as a defender, you're already more confident. I think as a defender or a midfielder, you're looking at those guys putting in that much effort, and you know the responsibility is on you now to make sure that their effort isn't going to nowhere.
Yeah, I think that was one of the interesting things to see just because, from a BJ Callaghan perspective, you're looking at more taking offensive risks and having that defensive kind of risk in the background. But having these attacking players actually come back into defense and help out really definitely improved the squad. And I will just say the proof of concept from BJ, you're starting to see so much more of what BJ Callaghan is trying to do in the squad match over match. And you could see it being successful this match because from the mistakes that we've seen in previous matches, a lot of them are just bad passing, just incomplete kind of control. And there wasn't a lot of that this match. A lot of it, like you got to see those one-touch passes, that completeness happen with this Nashville squad.
So a couple things. I do think it's worth noting, like, there's a difference between guys getting back to defend and still being offensively minded versus having like 11 behind the ball. Because like Nashville has always typically defended with everyone. It's just defending in a different kind of way and getting more out of the work of defending. And I think that this was kind of an example of that, whereas you're not really bunkering, but you're forcing the turnover, you're forcing the bad pass, you're forcing the interception, and then hitting and going forward or taking back possession and trying to build. I will say this, defensively overall, this is like the least worried I've been watching Nashville defend in this BJ Callaghan run. The only real opportunity that Atlanta had was the kind of opportunity that Nashville's been giving up, which is Dan Lovitz misplays a ball, loses possession, it hits the post. It should have been 1-1. If we're being honest with ourselves, it should have been 1-1 at that point. But generally speaking, like the center backs, very good at snuffing out anything. When they started crossing, I got less and less worried about Atlanta getting on the board because it's clear that they've kind of figured out playing together. And I just wasn't really all that concerned. Even like some of the best opportunities that Atlanta had were easy saves for Joe Willis because people were in the right place. And you weren't really worried about it. And I do really think that, I mean, it starts, and we always talk about it starting at like center back, center half, like with Walker Zimmerman, and recently had been Bauer, but I do think that Jack Mayer had a good game, and it's been a while since he's had one. Easy to say after a clean sheet, but like if they can get those two figured out and on the same page and working together, this team is so much better than what it has been the last few months.
And a couple points. I want to go back to your point about like when I'm talking about the attackers defending. Yes, that is not parking the bus. That's not 11 people behind the ball. But just to kind of show you that the defending starts all the way in Atlanta's half. That's really the idea of what BJ Callaghan is doing with Nashville SC. The leader of tackles for Nashville SC with 4 tackles in this match was Sam Surridge, the striker. Just so we're clear, this is not something that's like Nashville sitting deep and allowing Atlanta to come at them. No, Nashville was pretty positive with the ball specifically. But what we're talking about here is that a defensive unit means everybody from Joe Willis all the way up to Sam Surridge. It doesn't just mean 3 or 4 players. And that's kind of the different vibe that Nashville SC is rolling with now. That kind of that defending happens way higher up the pitch. So then when they come closer, when Atlanta comes closer to Nashville's goal, the threat is not as much, which goes back to Clay's second point there. Nashville limited Atlanta to 0.6 XG that entire match. And I'm willing to bet a lot of it was from that one chance. I think Daniel Rios hit the post. I think outside of that, Clay, you're 100% right. I mean, Atlanta didn't have much, and they have some talented players up top. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they did get rid of some really talented players, but they have good players. This Atlanta team has not been that bad going forward, which means to me that Nashville defensively did well, and that does go back to the defenders, of course, but all over the whole pitch. I thought Nashville defended Atlanta really well.
Well, and I think that would be one of the questions that I would ask the both of you. And I'm definitely not trying to get down on a Nashville win. I'm excited it happened. Do you think this is more Nashville finally coming together, or do you think this is more Atlanta as an opponent is kind of in a weird space? Or do you think it's a mix of both?
I mean, most questions like that are usually a mix of both, but to me, it's certainly more the former than the latter. Nashville's performance was indicative of things that have been built on by the performances before. So it'd be one thing if like Nashville had just been a pile of crap for like a month. and results wise, they have been, but the performances had gotten progressively better. And this is like what a Nashville win, probably in BJ Callaghan's mind with the current group of players, this is what a Nashville win should look like. Like this should be what a typical win he wants to look like. You have the ball, you force turnovers, you limit chances, like Hani Mukhtar is involved. Like it is what he's looking for performance wise. And we've seen that from the way that he's set up week in and week out. As opposed to obviously Atlanta's not a good opponent, but like if this wasn't shaded by what we've seen from the last month of BJ Callaghan, then I would say something different. But this is what it's been building towards is this type of performance.
Yeah, and like an Atlanta team that what I think it's a bit of both to answer your question. But you have an Atlanta team that has been somewhat okay defensively. You know what I mean? They haven't been as disastrous defensively as Nashville have been. But Nashville disrupted that. And I think a lot of credit will have to go to Nashville for suffocating Atlanta really early on. Those first 10 minutes, Atlanta did not get a glimpse of the ball. I mean, it was all Nashville at every single point of the pitch, and they were rewarded for it. When you go out away from home, you start off that well, and you get a goal. It changes the dynamic of the game, and you force Atlanta to be a little bad or a little worse than what they are. Right now, obviously, again, their starting point is not very good. This is not a Columbus team. Speaking of Columbus, Atlanta beat Columbus at home. So, we've seen these things happen in MLS where the team is a little bit better, but something happens early on or the other team forces them to play in a way that isn't to their ideal. And when you go out, you score a goal early, you're suffocating them. Again, you're kind of going at them from their own box all the way through to your own. I think that forces the opponent to be less creative and kind of forces them to be not as good.
A couple of other performances I believe that we should highlight for this match as well. Number one, obviously being goal scorer Alex Mouille. I think this is one of the I wish it was more than just like one or two matches each season that we get this type of performance from Alex Mouille. It's more on the other side. But you could see just what that goal meant to him and the way that he performed. I mean, he was almost in tears, it seemed like, scoring that goal on the pitch, just watching the highlights of that. Alex Mouille had an incredible match on that side.
I mean, narrowly, missed out on an assist as well. And I do think I think Alex Mouille is the type of he's an interesting character among Nashville fans because I think that certain people look at him as an indicator of everything that's wrong with his Nashville team build, and I think other people look at it the exact opposite way. I think we all pretty much like him and like kind of his versatility and what he can bring to a Nashville SC squad. But he's a guy who can be depended on a lot. I mean, if you're dependent on him to be one of your better players, you're probably not going to have a good year. But if he's a guy who can be a role player, a bit player, a guy who can play as a member of the back line and a guy who can play in the attack and in the midfield, like super versatile. And this was a game where they kind of needed a little bit extra because Schaffelberg's out. Congrats to Schaffelberg. He had a child over the weekend, so big weekend for him. But like you needed a performance out of him, and he gave it. And I think that along the lines where you get a good performance out of Teal Bunbury, you get a good performance out of Alex Muyl. They are kind of like indicators if Nashville's doing well or bad. If you get a good performance out of either or both of them, typically speaking, you're looking at a win. But if you get a poor performance out of either or both of them, it kind of goes the other way. And so he's an interesting dude to watch. But I was just really happy for him to have a good performance and in a not like a good moment, like just a good overall performance. Like there's not a whole lot bad that you can say about him for how he played on Saturday.
Yeah, both of those guys I thought had a great game, especially Teal Bunbury. I thought he played his butt off, and he was there really, really putting in some a performance that you just don't expect from somebody of that age who's been around as long as he has. And he's not that old, I know that, but like he was very active. But just to comment on what
he's
Steven
older than
said,
you guys, but younger than me.
Yes, somewhere in between there. But just to comment on what Steven was saying, I think the emotions you saw with that Alex Muyl goal were really just the release of not scoring for so long and definitely not scoring from open play. I mean, I even tweeted, I was like, this is not a drill, y'all. Like, Nashville SC scored from open play. Like, this is something that hasn't happened in a long time. And I think his reaction to it and everybody else around him, when you saw that reaction, it was definitely warranted. Just that, like, the goal went in and it counted. And wow, what a moment that was. Like, incredible moment for everybody.
I definitely think it's also worth mentioning as well. Sam Surridge hits double-digit contributions for Nashville this season. It doesn't seem like it in some ways, but I think it's just a good indicator of him and his performances. I mean, if that offside was not there, that was an absolutely beautiful finish from him on that side. He made it look so easy, but it was off the volley. Definitely looked like it had some toughness to it. But for him to come up, into the squad and get double-digit goal contributions is something this team has needed.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would say it was necessarily a successful season for Sam Surridge. Obviously, still some time to change that, of course, but I do think like it's important to drive home that it hasn't been an unsuccessful season. I think that there's a difference there. I think that he can be a DP striker, and I think at times he's shown himself to be a DP striker. And this isn't an Ake Loba situation. This isn't like a Jonder Cadiz who's good but maybe not good enough. I think that if this Nashville team was okay, even like just better than like just an average season, we would see a lot more out of him. And he's still got a chance to hit. I think, Valer, did you say 15 was what you expected from him goal contribution wise before the season started?
So I think I had 12 to 15 was, I think,
yeah. So like he's
know.
kind of, we expected more on the goal side, honestly, but I think he's kind of hitting the bar of what we kind of expected from that. And I think that now in a system that's more progressive and that will be more attacking, that will have a little bit more versatility to it, we will expect even better out of him next season.
And I do want to put it in perspective, just how important his 8 MLS goals are. That other than CJ Sapong with 12 goals in 2021, no one has scored more than 5 goals in a single MLS season for Nashville SC that isn't named Hani Mukhtar. Let me repeat that. Hani Mukhtar and one-time Sapong are the only 2 players who have scored more than 5 MLS goals for Nashville SC in a regular season. So Samson scoring 8 is nothing to scoff at. It's something that hasn't happened before, really, for Nashville SC.
And he will have the chance to do more, as Nashville SC does have a double week coming up when it comes to matches. We're going to talk about those, talk about the playoffs, and give our pleasant predictions. We're going to do that next right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at PharmaSoccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Of course, you can also check us out on Patreon. As I mentioned in the last segment, it does help the show out. So please go check out our Patreon. We'd love to shout you out. We give shout outs for 5-star reviews on your podcasting apps as well. So please make sure you go leave us a 5-star review on that. So we can comment and bring you up on the show. We would love to shout you out. So thank you so much again for listening to the show, being a Patreon member, and doing all of that fun stuff. Before we kind of get into just a 2-week match, getting the playoff picture, all that type of stuff, it was a wild MLS weekend as well. El Tráfico happening, which ended up being extremely wild in terms of that. Messi coming back after not playing for a while and scoring 2 goals just automatically. Miami is really good, and it's really unfortunate that Miami is this good. Anything else
Chicago
happen?
actually won a match too.
Who won a match?
Chicago.
Yeah. Chicago and Montreal both winning the week Nashville SC actually wins is I don't know, something. It's like Bizarre World or something. But yeah, I think, I mean, not I think, the supporter shield seems, locked up for Miami, which is kind of crazy to consider. Messi has missed the last 2-3 months and they still are that good. That said, I think they might have a shot at the points record, which was set by New England a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, actually. So we'll see. We'll see if they're gonna hit that. I think that's the only sort of storyline for the Supporters Shield that's left. I don't think anybody else is catching up with them. I think the most exciting part for the remainder of the season is just those playoff spots or play-in spots from both conferences. The East is a lot more congested than the West. But the West still has some fight, and definitely those top 4 spots as well. There's some in play for them as well.
The East is crazy. The difference between
insane,
New England,
dude.
Yeah, the difference between New England and 15th and DC, which is in the last playoff spot, is 6 points, and everyone is playing everyone. So like, it's nuts. It's genuinely a crazy situation, and like this could be, a pretty big week on that front for Nashville, because Nashville, they don't have a game in hand on everybody. New England has a game in hand on Nashville, who is level with most of these teams, but has a game in hand on both DC and Toronto, who's in 8th with 36. Might be a little bit too far for Nashville to get that far. But Nashville on 29 points is just 4 points off of DC. They're playing one of their contenders for this spot in Chicago on Wednesday. Chicago, they do have a game in hand on Chicago, so they can effectively knock Chicago out of the race, really, if Nashville gets a win on Wednesday. And, I'm a pro at relegation fights, and this is kind of a similar situation here. Anytime that you can get one up and knock and take another team out of the fold, is only a good thing, because it'll knock their confidence going forward. So maybe, they'll lose to you again towards the end of the season. And you just put pressure on everyone else. Like, had Nashville not won against Atlanta, they'd probably be almost certain, they'd be pretty close to out of the race at this point. But them getting a win, Chicago gets a win, Montreal gets a win. Now Philadelphia is feeling pressure. Atlanta's certainly feeling pressure. DC is feeling more pressure. And so you're really setting up for a really good fight down the stretch.
Yeah, not only does Nashville have a game on Chicago, they have a game in hand on DC as well. So they're 4 points away with a game in hand, which could effectively be 1 point away from DC, who are in that last playoff spot. I had some discourse on Twitter earlier this week about, I said playoffs are still in play, and somebody was like, well, how? And that's how, because all the teams are playing each other and all the teams are taking points from each other. So if Nashville can get 2 wins and a draw from these 3 games, they're already pretty much a point away from the playoff spot, if not in a playoff spot. Like, that is a possible scenario that could happen after losing 10 games in a row. So I'm not going to go back to what we did last week, because I think we did kind of talk about this, but just to kind of put it in perspective, playoffs are certainly still in play for Nashville SC.
And Wednesday, like, just to note, Inter Miami is playing Atlanta United on Wednesday. And so you think that's probably a Miami win. And that's another another team that you can push down closer to Nashville and further away from the playoffs should Nashville get a win over Chicago.
Also, if you were worried even a little bit at all, like I still had my like 5% worry, San Jose did lose on Saturday. So when it comes to any sort of wooden spoon conversation, it's looking less and less likely. I understood how unlikely it was last, but I need to double check and make sure San Jose did lose over the weekend. So it seems like we're pretty good on that standpoint.
They've given up 65 goals in 28 matches, San Jose.
It's really good defending there. But I should mention that these bubble teams also include Philadelphia Union, who I do believe they're a pretty good team. They finished 4th in the League's Cup. They're not a bad team at all. They just kind of had a bad stretch of games. New England Revolution have improved tremendously, even though the results aren't always there. But like Clay said, they have 2 games in hand. So I think if I'm Nashville SC, I'm worried about those two more so than the Atlanta, the Montreals, and the Chicagos of the world. But you do have to battle those 2 good teams as well to get into a playoff spot. It's not just the bad teams.
Yeah, and Inter Miami was the team it beat Philadelphia. They're playing good teams as well. And I think, Clay, you're right. Miami playing Atlanta definitely helps out in Nashville's favor for sure this week, while Nashville does have Chicago and Cincinnati.
And who are we kidding? They're all bad teams. They're all 10th to 15th in the East. None of these are good teams, but they're just some are better than the others.
And Nashville's got a higher payroll than basically all of them. So.
Well, that makes it feel good. But we do have a 2-week. I feel like it's been so long since we've had a 2-match week here. With Leagues Cup and everything going on, I feel like it's been a while since we've been able to talk about Nashville having 2 matches. Of course, with Chicago on Wednesday and then Cincinnati on Saturday. Both matches are at home as well. I am very curious about what the attendance is going to be like Wednesday against Chicago. I feel like it's going to be very Open Cup-esque in that stadium. I'm hoping not, but it's Chicago on a Wednesday. You never know. I don't know. Is the weather supposed to be nice on Wednesday?
Who knows?
I don't know. It's been almost a month since the last home game, though.
Or not an MTSU game, so it may not rain, I should say.
But yeah, it's been a month since the last home game, so I think some people are excited to go to the stadium and see Nashville.
Well, anything else we need to talk about before previewing these 2 matches? Is there anything else you guys want to bring up? Just preview these and let's go.
I haven't brought up the fact that Indiana got a Big Ten road win by like 30. So go Hoosiers.
Yep. I would also like to bring up that Arsenal are effectively the best team in London again.
No one needs to talk about the Premier League. I think this is a well-established fact that on this podcast,
hey, don't need Steven's team beat Bournemouth. Okay,
yes, we did.
I texted someone when that second Nashville goal was disallowed. In my recent experience, only bad things happen when you go up 2-0 in a match.
You didn't want it. No, we can go into Chicago. They're not good. They don't have Shaqiri, but that's a good thing. And if that tells you anything about that franchise, that explains it. That your DP that you paid so much money for not being part of your team anymore is the best thing to happen to you. There's a lot of movement.
It is weird the amount of celebration. It's warranted, but the amount of celebrations from my Chicago friends when he got it was a bad relationship, and I feel like this happens to Chicago over and over again, and I just want them to have one good relationship with, I don't know, somebody on their squad that they like and actually stick with. But yeah, it just doesn't seem to work out that way.
Yeah, they have some good pieces, don't get me wrong, and I think this team I've been saying this since the day it was announced that Gary Smith will no longer coach Nashville, but Gary Smith would get this Chicago team to a playoff spot. And I am 100% serious about this. But I digress. This is not about that, but they have some good pieces. Andrew Gutman, Nashville SC legend, of course, is on the Chicago roster. They traded for Ariel Lassiter from Montreal, who also used to be with Miami. Pretty dynamic sort of wing back. Herbert's still there. Obviously, he's good. And yes,
I think it's not even controversial to say Gary Smith would have Chicago in a playoff spot. Of course, I don't also find it controversial that Gary Smith would have his Nashville team in a playoff spot, but we'll leave that where it lays.
Yeah, I don't think it's controversial at all.
But
Kuipers is the other DP who has been pretty good for them up top. But then I think the one player that kind of everybody's looking for is Brian Gutierrez. I think young U.S. international or U.S. youth international, I should say. Really dynamic, really good player. He plays kind of 10 wing up top sort of position. Yeah, I think he would be the one to cause Nashville problems if anybody was going to.
And then we also do have Cincinnati on Saturday as well. Cincinnati has been playing well. They're still in second place in the East, I believe, right behind Miami. They had Hell's Real Derby over the weekend, which ended very, just it's kind of a meh type of match for it, which is probably honestly good for both of those teams. But again, as Clay brought up, there is one team that we beat in double digits since May, and it was Cincinnati away.
Funny stat here. The last time Chicago won on the road was against Cincinnati. So if that's not the most MLS thing that you've ever heard, yeah, Cincinnati, they're a good team. I mean, it's unfortunate that we have to say that every time that Nashville plays Cincinnati now, but they're a good team, but they're also a good team that has a history of matching up pretty poorly with Nashville SC and the pieces that NSC has. I do think that if Nashville were to get a win against Chicago, they would really lay down a marker for everyone else in the playoff race if they turn around and beat Cincinnati. And I think that that would really mark kind of the move forward that Nashville wants. I don't know that that's going to happen against the Cincinnati team at this point in the season. And I don't know that I would necessarily expect that. But when you put Nashville against Cincinnati, especially the last 2 years, you sit there and go like, well, there's no reason that Cincinnati shouldn't win this match. And then they don't, you know, like that's happened multiple times. And so I can't really come up with a good reason why Nashville's going to beat Cincinnati, but I do think like it's a tough team, it's a tough environment. Nashville could potentially have a little bit of momentum going into that match. So it should be very interesting to see how Cincinnati manages that.
So Clay, let's plug and predict, get into this, and let's see how we do.
I think that Nashville is going to come and fly on a flyer against Chicago. They've done it before. I think Chicago really pulled a win out of nothing. At least in the last couple months of the last couple months, they pulled that win out of nowhere over the weekend. And I think that Nashville, now that they've gotten a little bit of confidence, they've gotten a clean sheet on the road. Honey's got on the score sheet. I think that they're going to come out in really good form against Chicago. And it's weird because I don't think I've said that about Nashville in a while. So I think it's going to be I really want to be wild, but I'm just going to go with another 2-0 against Chicago. And then after they win 2-0 against Chicago, you can go check me out at Clay Lassol on Twitter and Instagram. You can also give a look-see at Nashville Soccer Archive. If you have anything you'd like to donate to the Vandy collection for the Nashville Soccer Archive, please let me know. And then you can go give some money to Kicking It 615. I hear they do good work. And then you can settle in on Saturday and watch Nashville and Cincinnati play to a riveting scoreless draw at Geodis Park.
So only check out Clay, though, if it is a 2-0 win. You should donate to Kicking It 615 no matter what happens in such.
If it's a 2-0 win against Chicago, I'm going to donate $20 to Kicking It 615.
Ooh.
And I would like everyone else listening to do the same. And if it's just a win, I don't know, donate $10. I don't know. And if it's a loss, donate $25 to Kicking It 1-5.
Nashville SC out here making people broke, man. Last time I predicted an Nashville win for the first time in a while, and it worked. So maybe I'll do it again now. So I'll say 3-1 against Chicago. And for the Cincy game, I really think Cincy's defense is struggling lately, man. They don't look very good, and I think Nashville's attack has been good. Let's do 1-1. Let's do 1-1 for the Cincy game. I almost predicted a Nashville win, but that just seems ridiculous. I don't think that's going to happen. So we'll do a Chicago 3-1, Cincinnati 1-1. Follow me at Valer Shabilla on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads, please.
All right, Steven, how many goals is Taylor Washington scoring in these two games? Because I know you're about to throw out a big number.
If you're just going to jump.
How many hat tricks do you predicting this week?
At PH Steven HG on all my stuff. I'll follow up Clay's shenanigans. If 2-0 does happen, I will absolutely donate $20 again. It says 1-5. That'll be terrific.
This goes without saying, but me too.
Yeah. But on Wednesday, it is going to happen. Finally, after 2 weeks of predicting this, 4-4 draw on Wednesday against Chicago. It's going to be wild. Everybody's going to forget how to play defense, and it's going to be a really good time. And then on Saturday, we're going to remember how to play defense, but also not score. So it's going to be a 0-0 draw. Just complete tale of two opposites Wednesday and Saturday.
And just like we said the last time Nashville played Cincy, it would be the most Nashville thing possible to lose to one of the worst teams in MLS and then turn around and beat Cincy. Like, that's what happened.
I feel like that's what happened that week, didn't we?
So it could happen again.
Wasn't it San Jose that week where we lost to San Jose and then
New England?
That's what it was.
I'm pretty sure it was. I might be wrong, but it was like, it was stupid. Whatever it was stupid.
Well, thank you so much for listening to the show, everybody. We really appreciate it. We're glad to be talking to you after a win and with a 2-week match, 2-match week coming up. We're very happy about that. So, of course, we'll be back next week to talk about these 2 matches. And we wish Nashville SC the best of luck. And, enjoy the home matches, everybody. If you do make it out to Geodis Park, we'll see you next week. Have a good rest of your week.